Welcome to In Good Company, where relationships drive results, with your host, Lisa Kilray. In each episode, we explore how great leaders build trust, inspire teams, and turn meaningful connections into real success.
Welcome back to In Good Company, where relationships drive results, the podcast where we explore the leadership lessons, business strategies, marketing insights, and relationships behind successful companies and careers. I'm your host, Lisa Kilray, president of WSI eResults. We help manufacturers and industrial companies improve how they're found, evaluated, and trusted across Google, AI search, ChatGPT, LinkedIn, and today's evolving digital landscape through our search everywhere optimization approach. My guest today is Greg Novak, CEO of Claritas Consulting. Greg has spent decades helping organizations accelerate growth, improve performance, and navigate change. Throughout his career, he's led startups, high-growth companies, turnarounds, and publicly traded organizations, giving him a unique perspective on what separates companies that consistently succeed from those that struggle to reach their full potential. Today, we'll talk about leadership, growth, and customer relationships and how business leaders can position their organizations for long-term success in an increasingly competitive marketplace. Greg, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Lisa. Thanks for having me.
No problem. It's good to have you. So I always like to begin with the person behind the title. Looking back on your career, what first attracted you to business leadership?
I was hired out of engineering school by General Electric, and I was sent away to one of their schools, and then I was transferred to their aerospace aircraft engine division. Those days, GE was Wall Street Journal front page news every day, Harvard Business Review. They were the general management model, and so those were my early experiences. Right in, they were formative. Jack Welch was there. His beliefs permeated the company. HR was, folks would say, what was the best part of GE or the most powerful part of GE? My answer was it was HR. They managed to carry messages, leadership, training, measurement down through the organization, and so a lot of what I have really came from there.
Awesome. So when you started out, did you ever imagine your career would take you in the direction it did, or did opportunities along the way shape your path?
Opportunities along the way. I grew up in a family, a town who didn't know a whole lot about what was going on in the rest of the world, right? And so I didn't have a lot of experiences or expectation. But I got to GE, and it was a meritocracy. And if you did well, you got experiences. I mean, I moved. I moved every 18 months, took a new position, new experience, and they used to tell us 6 months to learn the job, 6 months to make a contribution, and 6 months to find a new job. And so, the exposure that I got in that environment was really phenomenal. And what happened was that people met me and would recruit me, quite honestly, to new experiences, right? Whether within GE or after I left. Most of my career was a series of recruitments where someone said, "Come do this. We need you to help."
Right.
So I didn't have a plan. Probably didn't have a plan until I was 35 or 40.
Right. Your plan just happened and it happened to work out. So,
Yes.
yeah. So you led startups, as I mentioned, and mature organizations and companies going through significant change. Looking back, what experiences had the biggest influences on the leader you've become today? Or one experience?
I'll give you two.
Okay.
Uh, Very early on, GE had a series of philosophies that were maybe not said out loud, but it's how people moved forward or how people left the organization. But I think the one among them the most was integrity. Um, you know, if you went into a review, if you were miserable uh, individual to your employ to the folks who worked with you, one would think the company would frown on that, but they didn't. What they cared about was that you were miserable to your employees, your coworkers, and your boss. They wanted you to be consistent. If you were inconsistent, they didn't trust you. It was an honesty issue. It was an integrity issue. So those who moved ahead were those who really had high integrity. And if you ever had a boss or a coworker that you thought this person is just managing the system, GE would find them and get rid of them. It was
Hmm.
interesting,
Yeah,
and
that
that
is.
yeah, very 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 powerful. Um, the second I think big one was, we took Harris Interactive from zero to $300 million in an internet startup, and my first title there was president of the internet. So me and Vice President Gore. Um, we literally started. We had zero revenue. We had $50 million a year later. So we were going 1,000
Wow.
miles an hour, hitting the tops of the waves, and uh, we went from no employees to 1,000, almost all of which I hired, and the challenges, right? I had team members who had started at zero, had grown a $30 million business working for me, that sometimes during that 10-year process, I had to actually take them out of their roles and put someone else in, even though they had built it with me, right? Everyone gets to a
Interesting.
place where they can only do so much, and that was difficult, because we had come up together. Um, Very difficult, but also very instructive. Growth, scale, change, all those things. Everything has to change.
Right. So when you look across all the organizations you've worked with, what do the best companies consistently do better than everyone else?
Consistently, irrespective of marketplace. Um, I'm going to say the answer is people, people and people. There's a phrase: A's hire A's and B's hire C's. The best companies only hire A's, and A's only want to be surrounded by other A's. Um, and they manage the people thing, right? They make sure the right people move forward. When I was at General Electric, we grew from $2 to $7 billion in the aircraft division over the course of about 8 years, and every 18 months we had a headcount reduction. Now that seems crazy, but it was
Yeah,
just a process there where we were forced to remove the bottom 10% of all of our employees every 18 months or so.
right.
That refreshed the organization. No manager wants to fire somebody. Nothing enjoyable about that. But that process changed that. So people, customer centricity. Any company that loses its way on the most important thing, you got to serve customers, right? Um,
Absolutely.
those are the things that make a difference.
Right. So, I mean, you've got a lot of broad experience working for companies, but now you're president of Claritas Consulting, so you have exposure to clients' businesses, which gives you a whole
Yes.
nother perspective. Do you find that most companies struggle because they have the wrong strategy or because they struggle to execute a good strategy consistently?
Short answer is number two. And along my career, I went oddly enough back and forth between consulting and operating management. And consulting is a wonderful way to learn incredibly fast because you don't have to do it. But I would say that 90% of the time, execution is the issue, not strategy. And in the rare 10% of the time, that's usually about being misaligned on cost or price as opposed to market or direction.
Right. So, what do you think some of the biggest blind spots are that you see leadership teams overlook as their organizations grow? Because clearly you've had some very fast growth with some of your experiences.
Um, I think all organizations, not counting small ones, have um, cultures, right? I've been in a lot of different companies, and a lot of different companies have a lot of different culture. And some of those cultures, frankly, are um, negative to success. And so there's a real change management requirement. And a lot of the work I do these days with my customers, it would not be inappropriate to say that we normally turn over about 80% of the staff in the company before we get the kind of change we're looking for. Um, so a manager who worked for
Yeah,
me said her favorite line of mine was, "We will change, or we will change."
right.
Um, right? And you got to get folks heading for true north, right? You got to know where north is. That's strategy.
Yep.
But folks got to row in that direction. They got to pull. They got to point the boat that way. And occasionally northeast is okay, and northwest can be okay because it's right. But anyone who's rowing south while everyone else is rowing north really belongs somewhere else.
Yeah, I guess it goes back to that saying, you either jump on the bandwagon or you jump off.
Yeah, yeah.
That's kind of
And
what you're
some
talking about.
and some people select out.
Yeah,
They self-select, and that's fine. Maybe there'll be an organization for them somewhere, and some don't. And then, management's responsibility is to make the company successful. I tell folks all the time, particularly when it's getting tough, I'm like, your job is to run this company as well as you can so that the employees who don't get a vote, the hourly worker on the shop floor who needs this job to feed his or her family, right? You owe it to them to make sure this company continues. And that means if you got to do tough things today to be successful, then you do those difficult things because you have to have some belief that that's what you're supposed to do.
right. Yeah. So I want to kind of move into an area talking about growth, customers, and differentiation. When you look at organizations that consistently outperform their competitors, where do you think they create the greatest competitive advantage?
Hmm. Interesting question. I'd have to think about more specific markets, but I think that companies who consistently outperform have a series of internal things that they do that make sure they're renewing themselves on a regular basis. And that renewal is either new markets, new products, new opportunities, new strategic direction, change, and all that sort of thing. Jeff Bezos said at one time at a company meeting, he said, "I think Amazon will go bankrupt someday. That the life of most companies is only 30 years, and the pressure on companies to sustain. Apple's a great example. If you remember when Steve Jobs died." And Tim Cook took over, or I'm not sure that's exactly how it happened, but when I remember specifically when Cook took over, the concern was Steve Jobs the individual who was the innovator in products that kept Apple moving forward? And the answer turned out was, nah, there was a machine internal that churned out great product after great product after great product. And that's Apple's success. The contra to that would be a firm like Kodak, who invented the digital camera, but didn't release it to the marketplace because they were afraid of the damage it would do to their film business. And then Ricoh took them out. They're bankrupt today. So
Right.
you have to be able to throw it all away. You have to be able to renew, and you have to have a plan to do so.
Right. Those are great examples. And Kodak is kind of a name from the past, a very sad story for sure. Um, so much has changed, over the past 5, 10, 20, 50, 100 years. How do you think customer expectations have changed over the last 5 to 10 years? And what do companies need to do differently to keep up with those changes?
So customers have infinite data at their tips. Um, it used to be if you wanted to compare two automobiles you were going to buy or anything, two washing machines, you had to go out and drive them and do test drives. As recently as just a few years ago, you used Google, which was phenomenally useful, and you'd go find comparisons and product reviews online. But even that took a couple of hours. I can get you an answer to any product question you want to know in about 15 seconds by typing into AI, which
Right.
right is like the better Google today, and have it come back and give recommendations. So infinite data at your fingertips. You really can't get away with putting bad products into the marketplace, like happened maybe in the 80s, right? So there's that. And there is, with I think rare exception, branding does matter. You have to actually support the brand. If you say you're X, everything you do better act and look like X, because customers can tell when that's not true. And I would add that in many product categories, brand matters less than it did. So in luxury category, certainly the image around right expensive
Mhm.
pocketbooks or something like that matters. But the average consumer today isn't going to have a heart attack whether they own a Chevy or a Pontiac or some other car. They want the best car for the money, and that brand, right, doesn't particularly carry any weight in my mind, other than if those cars are known to be not quality. In which case, the negative brand has real power.
Right, exactly. So many companies, I know you work with manufacturers, we work with manufacturers and B2B companies have exceptional products and decades of experience, but yet they still struggle to communicate what truly makes them different. Why do you think that is?
I think it's because manufacturing companies are traditionally run by manufacturing people. Okay, that was Kodak's problem.
Right.
I watched it happen. Kodak was big where I'm at, um, and that's the problem. If being an operational expert and delivering great products through manufacturing is how you got your job, it's probably also how you focused on the world. And what you really need to do is to go find somebody who's a brilliant marketer, brand builder, communicator, whatever it is. Okay. Um, Everyone has different skills. I'm good at a number of things, but there are some things I'm not so good at, right? Everyone has differentiated skill
Absolutely.
sets. Got to go find them.
Right. So you touched on this a little bit, Greg. You know, one of the biggest changes we're all seeing in business is the way customers research and evaluate potential suppliers. It's changing how companies build trust long before the first sales conversation ever takes place. One of the things I've noticed is that by the time a prospect reaches out to a company today, they've often already done a huge amount of research. They've read websites, like you said, they've watched videos, they've compared competitors. So they're coming with a lot of information. Are you seeing the same shift with your clients and how they're interacting with or acquiring new customers?
So on I work for an optics company. One of the companies I'm working with today is an optics company. And that field, this is a B2B business. It supplies doctors' offices to do eye exams and sell glasses, right?
Okay.
Um, Very traditional. You go to your eye doctor, right? And then you walk out and you pick a frame and they put lenses in them for you and so forth and so on. Um, those folks are being challenged. Some might say crushed by the advent of internet eyeglass sales, right? And a lot of times the internet eyeglass sales are significantly economically advantaged. Now, the quality of what gets delivered might be different than what you would get at your doctor's office. But yeah, they're faced with dramatic uh, change. Um, folks come in, they know what they want, they know what they can get somewhere else, and a fairly high percentage of patients walk out of a doctor's office today and don't buy eyeglasses.
Oh,
They end up getting their prescription, going online, or for that matter, going to Walmart or Costco or
and
something
yeah,
like that. Yeah,
right.
and so the places that you can get them today in that particular instance are fundamentally different. Um, and I think the optics industry is honestly a little bit late, right? I mean, Amazon devastated the bookseller market, what, 20 years ago? If you think
Yep,
about where Amazon started, they were a bookseller for goodness
that's
sakes,
it.
right?
Yeah, I remember
And
that.
and if you think about it, what they really are is a logistics company, right? Brilliant logistics company. But
Right.
yeah, you forget that's where they first challenged. But Barnes and Noble took a beating at the hands of Amazon. Um, so change is inevitable, I suppose, and you better roll with it, or you won't be here.
Yeah, you better adapt.
Yep.
Otherwise you'll be crushed. So, Greg, you've advised leadership teams across many different industries and stages of growth. Um, when you think about the best leaders you've worked with, what qualities do they consistently have in common?
The best leaders are consistent, right?
Yep.
Absolutely consistent. Um, there was always funny stories. There was a CEO, I believe it was Lincoln Electric, apparently was pretty colorful and pretty demanding. He was incredibly successful. 20 years of share growth, again and again and again. Um, but he was consistent. He was the same tough fella with everyone, right? All the time. So you know what you're dealing with, right? And people who can live and work in those environments, they join that. People who can't go somewhere else. That's okay. But if you're inconsistent, if you're up and down and left and right, folks don't know exactly what's going on, and that's disturbing. So consistency, right? And another
Yep.
way of saying that is honesty, right? Often brutal honesty. And if you're not honest, right? I'm a smart guy, but I'm not smart enough to remember the fibs I've told, right? So it's just easier to be honest, right? And that way you don't got to try to make it up again. Great communicators, right? Um, but you can't be fake. If you don't know the subject or don't know what you're doing, people will know, and
Right.
so you have to join in and learn as well. I mean, I moved around a lot, which means I had to learn lots of different issues and business items and things like that. Can't fake your way through that. You better be able to have
No.
that conversation.
Right. And business styles, I'm sure you
Yes.
encountered with all the
Oh, yes.
moving and different companies and jobs.
Yep. Yeah, very, very,
So,
very much.
yeah,
Those styles, General Electric was very much, uh, uh, you know, as long as you did a good job, all was good. It didn't matter. It was rough and tumble. I mean, Wall Street Journal wrote about it being terrifying. I worked with Xerox for a little bit. Xerox,
Xerox.
very political internally. Um, Folks didn't engage in meetings, but then they didn't also execute what the plan was when they left the room. One of the biggest problems I ever saw after moving on as I consulted was that ex-GE managers never understood the capability of the companies that they were now running. Right? I was always in the field working in facilities and working on projects and stuff. And the difference in fundamental capability and skill, there was just a wealth of talent. that they had at General Electric that didn't exist in smaller companies that I went to work on. And understanding that's critical.
Right. So as organizations become larger and more complex, what do leaders need to do to keep their teams aligned around a common vision?
So number one is communicate. And if we're talking about true conglomerates where there are multiple product lines, then you have to be aligned around some company values, right? We believe in X, Y, and Z. We believe this is how you treat people. So
Mhm.
because you can't um, have 13 different multi-billion-dollar business units and all have the same sort of go-to-market strategy or communication. You can't do that. So you have to line around something more universal to be successful, quite frankly. You know, Apple, Apple's really got one product, right? I mean, great electronic products. They don't also sell cars, or books or anything else. So Apple can be focused on that great electronic product, but a diversified company in a whole bunch of different fields, from credit reporting to subsea wellheads, right?
Yeah,
Uh, can't do it.
right. Yeah, I agree. So many executives become consumed by day-to-day demands of running the business. How important is it for leaders to step back and work on the business rather than always working in the business?
Most important thing in the world, and without a doubt, the most important question that you've asked me. And a simple way to put this is, I came up in Harris and I ran the business. I was the chief operating officer before they made me CEO. Um, and and I love running businesses. Someone once said, you look like an air traffic controller, a thousand things at once, landing airplanes. Um, I, I like that. Um, the person in charge of working on the business, the person in charge of strategy, there's only a couple in a company. And if that's the role you've moved into, which is the role, right, that I moved into as a CEO, if you don't do it, no one else is gonna. That's the real problem, right? There's lots of folks running the business busy every day, but if you don't work on, and what are we going to do next year, 3 years, and 5 years from now, I promise you nobody else is going to, right? And that's your role. I met a guy once. We were trying to buy his company, and he told me that he took off every Friday to go to the beach, right, metaphorically, and think about the business. Um, my first reaction was just a way to get out of work, but he wasn't wrong. Maybe not every Friday, but he wasn't wrong. You have to do it.
Right. You have to take a step back. You have to clear
Yep.
your mind and be focused on what your job is supposed to be.
And if I were going to give advice to somebody, I would tell them, and when you do that, make sure you go find some people who don't work in your business, who don't work in your company, because when you hold a strategy meeting with the folks who are on your team, right, whose continued employment is based upon doing what they already do well, you're highly unlikely to get any brand new insights for the direction to take the company. What you do is you get a lot of let's keep on doing what we're doing, right? Because that's what made us
Right,
successful. Go find somebody else to talk to.
right. So I like this question I'm going to ask you next. Looking back across your career, what's one leadership lesson that took years to fully appreciate?
You have to understand whether you're playing double A ball or triple A ball, right? You have to understand the competencies and capabilities of the people that you're working with. And then you have to um, manage your expectations and the way you work with them to help them get the most that they can be, right? If you've got someone running $100 million business reporting to you, then there's a certain level of expectation that you can have of that person, particularly if they're doing a good job, right? And you can push them. If you've got somebody who, right, is maybe managing a factory floor with 100 employees or 50 employees, they don't have near the background, skill, capabilities that the $100 million person does. And you have to um, understand what they don't understand, help them understand, right? I was fortunate. I had incredible training in my career. The number of people who I've run into and I've said, "Hey, you should do it this way," are like, really, you think? I'm like, yeah, yeah. Trust me, this has been done before, right? This has
Right.
been done before all over the world. Just do what I ask, it'll be easier. And I have to stop myself from doing that. I have to stop myself from saying just do it, right?
Right.
Because that doesn't get you much done in a world where folks feel like they get an opinion too. Every now and
Right.
again, every now and again they'll get a just do it because I said so. But
Right.
yeah, you have to recognize, it's a little like, I don't want mean to be derogatory, but it's a little like having, a 5-year old, a 10-year old, and a 15-year old. You talk to them all differently.
Right.
That's
Absolutely.
that's the big difference.
Right. So, Greg, if you could wave a magic wand and improve one aspect of how companies attract customers or differentiate themselves, where do you think the greatest opportunity exists today?
I think manufacturing companies in particular, right?
Hmm.
Even in B2B, because I'm working this fairly aggressively right now. Um, um, Simply do not have not put enough energy into filling the top of the funnel, so to speak, right? Marketing is what fills the top of the funnel, whether it's SEO, SEA on the internet, good websites, right? All of the touch points that customers can have with a company today, those touch points should be as important as the levels of quality on the factory floor. The employee retention programs, the focus on the customer, but many companies don't really know it, see it, understand it, haven't been around it. You got to be around a little bit, right? I learned to appreciate sales folks about halfway through my career. I mean, I was a technologist. I developed
Oh, it
jet
took
engine
that
tech.
long?
Yeah, no, it
It took
didn't.
half your career.
It no, probably less than that, but
Yeah.
probably took me 10 or 15. And part of it was because the first 10 years of my life I wasn't exposed to any.
Right.
I worked in giant companies that somebody else did that stuff, right? But when it came time to run some smaller companies, right, you got to see what they did, you got to see the contributions that they made, and you got to appreciate. And then I saw how much um, folks don't appreciate that part of the organization, right? I can name you a dozen people who I know who just think salespeople are unnecessary, right?
Yeah.
And that's wrong.
Right.
Someone has to do that work, right?
Yeah.
Just like the strategy thing. And so I think that focus on great sales and great marketing is important. Someone who I was impressed by, Salesforce, the company Salesforce,
Yep.
does a great job selling
Right.
Salesforce, right? A really great job. And I bumped into some others recently. But yeah, I think that's the spot where a leader in a manufacturing business ought to throw some money and some hours.
Yeah. I mean, you're speaking my language. I completely agree with you. I think a lot of business people want that quick win and they want the bottom of the funnel, close the deal. It's like you can't go from A to Z without, you know,
Yeah,
growing the
yeah,
relationship, providing information, and nurturing them over time, especially given the nature of higher ticket, more complex buying cycles.
no consulting company who consults in doing world-class sales and marketing has anything less than 9 or 13 steps in the sales process that fill the
Right.
top of the funnel out, right? I've got in this one company I'm working with today, I got some great closers this is a complex sale that we do, a lot of science involved, uh, highly educated doctors as consumers. I got great closers, right? And any hour my closers spend in the top 6 steps in the funnel is really just burning money, right?
Right,
What I need to do is to feed those closers as many opportunities as I can, right?
right.
But you have to
Absolutely.
think about that strategically, right? You have to think about what is the absolute best way to get this done, and then tune the organization for that. Too many people come. Too many people come to too many discussions with set views. We should do this. We should do that.
Right,
I don't have very many shoulds, right? A few things about quality and about people, right? But other than that, everything's on the table. Everything
right.
is always on the table.
Awesome. So finally, when people think about Greg Novak years from now, what do you hope they remember most about the way you led and the impact you had on the organizations you worked for?
Yeah, a gentleman worked for me at Harris, and years later he was talking to somebody, and that someone had gotten back to me, and that gentleman who did a good job said that I knew how to do research. I didn't know how to run a business, and Greg Novak taught me how to run a business. So I hope, for me, that teaching part, imparting knowledge, bringing someone along. I'm a big believer in the Socratic method. But anytime someone says, you've changed my mind, I agree with you. That's one of my best days. That's how I want to be remembered. I want to be remembered that I gave them something, that I was able to teach them something, and that I led with integrity.
That's great. I like that example and that story. So before we wrap up, Greg, where is the best place for listeners to connect with you and learn more about Claritas Consulting?
Well, that's an interesting question. I wish I had a good answer because I don't. Much like
LinkedIn?
LinkedIn. You know what? There you go. See, because I'm not marketing my own company, unfortunately. Um, um, I'm fortunate enough that almost all of my assignments I'm called on from someone who knows me and says we need help over here. And
Yep,
so I've not had to do anything
right.
to do this. And in fact, because I'm busy, I'm not doing anything. But I think LinkedIn's the right place, and I'm hoping to soon get a website up. And I've actually got a book in the works. Um,
Awesome.
yeah, and I want to use the book. I want to use the book to teach.
That's
My
great.
idea for the book is it's just not that hard, and maybe the subtitle, we can do it all in an equation, because it's just not that hard if you think clearly. And I'm hoping to maybe give back some of what I did personally in the form
Hmm.
of something that folks can open and use.
Right.
But yeah, if someone wanted to talk to me, I think LinkedIn. They're happy to send me an email at greg.claritas, Claritas, at gmail.com.
Okay. And then just for listeners, I think your LinkedIn profile is Gregory Novak,
It
if they're
is.
searching for you. Yeah. So I just
Yes.
wanted to point that out. So we'll be sure to include those links in the show notes. Greg, thank you so much for joining me today. I really enjoyed our conversation and I appreciate you sharing your experiences and perspective with us. One of the themes that really stood out to me is that sustainable growth isn't driven by great strategy or one great decision. It comes from strong leadership, a willingness to adapt, a deep understanding of customers, and the ability to build those lasting relationships. So thank you again for joining us, and thank you to everyone for listening. We hope today's conversation gave you ideas that you can apply within your own organizations and jobs, and I look forward to being in good company with you again next time.
Thanks for having me. It was great fun.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to In Good Company, where relationships drive results, with Lisa Kilray. Be sure to follow or subscribe so you never miss an episode. Until next time, stay connected and keep building relationships that drive results.